Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. I'm happy to hear that more and more people are getting spiritual these days. And it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be all about religion, but in that lies praying, prayers or sending messages, just thinking about something and you ask for something, you maybe ask for a sign or an outcome, and maybe you don't get it. Your prayers aren't answered. How come? Let's look at that today and how we should approach that. She is an amazing spiritual director. We've learned a lot even in the last couple of weeks on these podcasts, and she's back with us. She is Dr. Leslie Beckhart Jenal. And it's good to have you back, Leslie. How are you today?
I'm just fine. Thank you, Steve.
I'm going to say this and I mean it. Prayers answered with you, having you with us to really understand everything spiritual. And one thing I do want to say about you is you are clear, you get to the point, and also you work with anybody. Doesn't matter your race, your sexual orientation, religion, doesn't matter. It's spiritual, and you direct people on that. So let's get to it. Prayers aren't answered. Where do we go?
Well, we have to think about what prayer is first. I always think about it as a sort of a launching out towards God. And that launching out can happen when we have joy, and it can happen when we have times of trial. So I was thinking about why prayers seem not to be answered. And I think part of the issue is that we pray so hard for something we think we want, so narrowly focused on that we miss all the other signs on either side of the road. So there's no encounter, nothing that is without meaning. But when we're so narrowly focused, we don't always see the miracles on either side. And sometimes the response is not yet. Or sometimes the response is, wait, I have something better. The response is rarely no. If we look at it over time, we see in hindsight where God was the entire time. And if we're open to all those messages from wherever they come, then we understand that God is with us, even though sometimes it doesn't seem like that.
Wouldn't it be great if God, universe, the divine gave you that update? I got an answer for you. It's not coming right now. We don't get that. Or maybe we do, but we didn't see that.
We often get the answer, wait. But the waiting is always for something better than we knew to ask for in the first place.
How do we know the answer is wait?
I think we know when we don't get immediate gratification.
Okay.
For our prayer. And a lot of prayer is simply waiting, paying attention. I think the message in most religions is wake up, because it's here. It's already here. It's not coming tomorrow. It's not in the past. It's here right now. That's where the presence of God is. And I think that only through loss do we find out what we can never lose, which is the presence of God. And that is always right now. It also teaches us we can't cling to anything. We are basically in prayer experiencing that we're known, completely known and forgiven, completely the way we are. And that we are precious in our frailty and our brokenness, nothing is missing. Nothing. We don't need to be anything other than what we are. That's what is precious to the divine, that we are as we are. We're very precious, and that's the mystery, really, of the divine.
Do you feel that we pray improperly? I don't want, let me just reframe that. There's no wrong way to pray, I would assume. Okay. But should we reframe it the way we think in terms of asking for something? Let's say uh, somebody is not doing well physically, and you say a prayer, please heal them quickly. Um, is it reasonable to pray that way, or should the message be different?
I think it is reasonable to pray that way, but it's also important to realize that prayer changes us. It doesn't change God. God is unchanging, and God is present at all times. Again, it's where we're praying so narrowly for something we think we want, for that physical miracle, that we miss the miracles on either side of the path, which might be the person has peace. It might be that the person has forgiven and has been forgiven. It might be that the person is feeling closer to the presence of God. It might be a peaceful passing with comfort. There's so many things it might be, that the miracle might be, that we need to pay attention to those too. And it is infrequent that God will perform a physical healing. Infrequent. Not ever. Never, never. Just infrequent. Because God tends to work within the physical laws that God set up. The laws of biology, biochemistry, all of that are part of the laws that God has set up. And God tends to work through those. So I'm not saying a physical healing is never going to happen, because I've seen it before. I just don't think we can forget the other miracles on either side.
It's often hard to take when somebody passes, and it could be suddenly, it could be after a short illness or after a long illness, but you think they shouldn't be gone. And it's hard to accept that maybe there was a reason for it, or let me take the word maybe out. There was a reason for it, that they left us so soon. How does one accept that? A lot of times we do pray for somebody that's not doing well. How do we accept the fact that there is something, it's almost hard to even say this, better, that they passed, that we don't realize? How do you accept that?
Yes, that's true. And I would never say to anybody grieving, there's a reason for it. I never would, because I don't know the reason.
But you believe it, though. But you believe it, though.
I believe there is, but it may not be obvious on this side of the veil. And we know that grief is love with no place to go. But that life continues past death, I believe, because I've seen evidence of it as a hospice chaplain. For example, there is such a thing as near-death awareness. Now, near-death experience is when somebody flatlines and is resuscitated, comes back. Near-death awareness is something that happens almost always at the end of life. People see loved ones who've gone on before. They talk about going on a trip. They talk about visions of beautiful places. They generally look in the upper left-hand corner of the room. I'm not sure why that is. that those departed loved ones almost always show up. Almost always. Frequently it's mother, but not always. I had a man one time who had been driving those little pontoon boats on D-Day. So he'd drive up to the beach and the soldiers would get off, and then they would put bodies on the boat and he'd take them back. He had never spoken about that experience, and you can imagine why. I think he was 17 years old. I mean, so traumatic. But at the end of his life, those soldiers whose body he had retrieved came for him. And there was such a sense of joy and healing that was truly a miracle.
Wow. There's the testament to, we don't know. What's happening next? We don't know. We have to just, again, have faith in whatever the plan is. There's a song, I don't know if you remember the artist Dan Fogelberg. He was in the 70s.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, kind of a folk singer, had not a couple of pop hits. Actually, he went to number one in 1980 with a song called Longer. And a couple of years before that, he had an album out, and one of the songs was called Part of the Plan. And essentially it says what we're talking about. I don't know what the plan is, but the chorus goes something like, one day we'll all know. One day we'll all know. And it just kind of speaks. He's talking also about a relationship that didn't go well, but he's also talking about life in general, and it's part of the plan. There's a plan here. We don't know what that plan is. And same thing when we pray and our prayer's not answered.
I think, yes, there is a plan and a reason. We just may not know it on this side. We may understand it later. And it may not be for the reason we think always. I believe people have tasks here that when we're created, there's a plan for us to accomplish. And sometimes somebody has already accomplished that plan. Even children may have accomplished that plan already. However, to a grieving person, I would never say there is a reason. To a grieving person, I would never say this is acceptable. Because there are certain things in life that are not acceptable. There are certain things that are tolerated, but not acceptable. And our greatest wounds, our greatest griefs, our deepest shames, our greatest sins they're our gift, because they allow God to heal those wounds. And those are where the gifts lie. There is always a gift. I wouldn't say I always understand a reason, and I wouldn't say that to somebody who's necessarily grieving, that there's a reason, because I don't know it and they don't know it. But I do know there's healing. There is always healing. There is always a sense of the presence of God.
In our prayers, should we reframe it? Like, for example, we'll go back to the picture of somebody not doing well, or somebody looks like they might pass, or you're hoping for a miracle. And what's the first thing you're going to pray for? Please make them better. Please make them well. We might not get that answer.
We may not get that answer as to their physical healing.
Correct.
We may get their answer as to their spiritual and emotional healing, and the healing not only of the person in the bed, but of the family surrounding them.
Should we change that prayer to something more like, please watch over them, please take care of them, Please make it the best outcome possible, but show
Mhm.
me a sign that you're taking care of it or you're watching over them. Because we all want validation. So
Mm.
maybe you'll get that sign that, yeah, from the divine, I got this. I'm letting you know. It's okay. Um,
Mhm.
but you might
Mhm.
not get the outcome you wanted. Of course, what do you want? Them to be okay, the miracle to
Mhm.
happen. Would it be
Mhm.
reasonable to change your prayer in that direction?
Well, I think the prayer that will be answered is that second kind of prayer. Where is the best in us? Where is the gift in this? Where is the healing in this? But you're allowed to pray anyway and for
Sure.
whatever you want. It's just that narrowness. When you're so narrow on physical healing, you miss the miracles that may be the other healings, emotional forgiveness, spiritual growth in patient and family. There could be all sorts of other things. Now, I would probably pray for God to show me the miracles that are happening, to open my eyes, for me to wake up to
That's where
what's going on.
that's where I'm going with that. Yeah.
That's
Uh,
probably I would pray, but anybody else can pray,
sure.
prayer with
Yeah.
this individual.
Like we said
Mhm.
before, when we first jumped in today, there's no wrong way to pray, but we all
Mhm.
want to see the results of our prayer, and you might
Mhm.
not see it in that person getting better right away, but
Mhm.
you want to know that somebody's got your back. Can I share something with you in that regard?
Of course.
So
Of
it
course.
was 15 years ago. I had left a job after 2.5 decades, started super young. It was my dream job. It just didn't seem right anymore. And I ended it. I
Mhm.
found out a month later that my son was sick, very. And number one, I feel that that happened for a reason because I could not have taken care of him if I had continued working. So I took some time off. So
Mhm.
he had a condition where his skull needed to be cut open and pieced back together again. Um,
Mhm.
Sagittal stenosis. Nowadays, it's different the way they handle it, but needed to pick a doctor who's going to do that. How do you pick that doctor?
Mhm.
He's 9 months old. How do you pick that doctor? So went to a
Mhm.
bunch of different doctors, just didn't seem right. Just the answers weren't right. Driving back one day out of the city, and it was a rainy day, and we just saw a doctor, and it just didn't seem right again. And I just started going back to church for the first time in a long time.
Mhm.
And as I'm driving, I'm
Mhm.
thinking, okay, I went back. I'm spiritual. Show me a sign it's
Mhm.
going to be all right. Just let me know you're listening. Show me something, please. Can't make this
Mhm.
up. Another minute later, I pass an overpass and there's a billboard, and it was for an ad campaign for a TV show. I think it was True TV. And the billboard said,
Mhm.
Stephen, do I have your attention now? And there was more copy on the billboard about essentially it was an ex writing to her ex, and that was the
Mhm.
start of it. I didn't even read that. I just saw, Stephen, do I have your attention now? I didn't say a word. As I was driving, I just thought to myself, okay, thank you, gotcha. And if you Google billboard, Stephen, do I have your attention now, you'll see the billboard.
Mhm.
It was used
Mhm.
in that campaign. But that was probably my first ever realization that you ask, and a lot of times you'll get. And the end, picked a doctor a week
Wow.
later, and the team
Yeah.
did the surgery. It wasn't more than maybe 20 hours later. My son was sitting up in the bed with a big smile on. Everything was great, and he's sharp as anything. So it all turned out great. But that was my foray back into faith at that time, seeing that billboard.
But look at what you asked for. You asked for a sign and you got one, Stephen. Are you paying attention? Basically, the message is wake up, Stephen.
You're right.
Wake up.
You're
And
100%
when
right.
you woke up, then you found the fit with the doctor you might not otherwise have had. So God was leading you this whole time to see doctors that did not fit the situation or you just didn't feel good about. And then God said, wake up, and you found the right doctor. Maybe if you hadn't woken up, you might not have found a doctor who was better, who fit the circumstances. But God was telling you to wake up. And that's very frequent. There is nothing, there is no encounter, there is nothing we see, hear, taste, smell, or feel that doesn't have meaning. What you experienced is synchronicity, which means same time, literally. You experienced a coincidence that had meaning. That's what you experienced. And because you were awake, you saw the meaning. And it gave you confidence enough to pick the doctor, the right doctor.
Do you think it was a coincidence that I was driving and praying and asking for a sign at that moment and I saw that?
Mhm. I think that happens a lot of times. The problem is with the sign, we sometimes don't see it because we're looking for something else. So I'll tell you, as a hospice chaplain, I did a lot of funerals, a lot of celebrations of life, of all kinds, of all religions, of no religion whatsoever. And at each celebration of life, there was something that happened. So one time, the funeral directors were taking the coffin away from the cemetery, away from the funeral home and into the cemetery, right past the family. And one rose fell off at the wife's feet. Well, every single Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, and her birthday, he would give her one rose, always one rose. So that is what I mean by synchronicity. That's not a coincidence. There's a meaning there. And
I agree.
most people, after a loved one dies, maybe not immediately, but at some point get a sign or a presence that their loved one is okay. They may feel, sense, smell their loved ones. They may see a butterfly, right? Our body is a cocoon and the butterfly is the soul. They may see something else in nature. I have come to expect it because it is so common. And I have come to expect with every death, there is peace. It doesn't matter if the person was at peace 5 seconds before, but they're always at peace. And that to me is an ongoing miracle.
So I want to better understand that. So, Leslie, what you're saying is when somebody passes,
Mm-hmm.
the moment of passing,
Mm-hmm.
there is peace.
There is.
Always.
Always.
And you've seen it. You've witnessed it. This is why I'm bringing this up.
Yes, I started out as a hospital chaplain, which is basically you're in ICUs and ERs and neonatal ICUs. And sometimes somebody comes in to the emergency room after a trauma of some sort. And they may die when they get to the ER. But if you look at them carefully, there is peace. Somehow God arranges that for us so that we're never afraid. And somehow for many people, God arranges that a departed loved one comes and gets us. So we're not afraid. We get all the help we need. I can promise you.
More people should know that.
Mhm.
And I'm glad that's why we're talking about it, because how many times you think back to when you weren't there? Loved
Mhm.
one passed away.
Mhm.
They may have been alone. Did they
Mhm.
suffer? Did they go
Mhm.
in peace? But you're saying they went in peace.
They go in peace, and I've even seen a lot of deaths from COVID, for example, and that is a very unpleasant way to go. But I'll tell you something about not being there. Sometimes people wait until everybody's left the room because it may be an experience they want to have personally with God. People also wait to see a certain loved one, or they wait until there's forgiveness, or they wait until the family says it's okay to
There you
go.
go. Yeah.
And as long as we don't say it's okay to go, the person has a tendency to stay. And sometimes that's not right.
Lots of insight today, Leslie. Good stuff, though, and answers to a lot of questions that we've all had. And if anybody has any more questions about their faith, their spiritual direction, you're there to guide them along the way and literally take their hand. How do we reach you?
You reach me at my website, which is progressivespiritualdirection.com. And there's a little form you can fill out to get a free consultation. And I'll be happy to talk to you for 15 minutes, half an hour, just to make sure that you and I are a good fit. And sometimes what people come to me for is because they want to achieve spiritual progress. But the achievement is very much like that narrowness towards an outcome. That may not be that the outcome that God wants you to have. It's much more a matter of allowing and surrender, because God does all the work in our lives everywhere. God does all the work.
It's so interesting that we talked about your prayers not getting answered, and that turned into dealing with the passing of someone. And why? I don't know. There's probably a reason, but maybe we'll know. I don't know. Maybe we won't know. Maybe somebody's watching this, or maybe somebody will watch this online in 2 months from right now when they needed to hear it. So for that, I thank you, Leslie. Always a pleasure. Always learn so much and get that insight that you're not going to find anywhere else. That spiritual direction. I appreciate you. I look forward to the next time we get a chance to get together.
Me too, Steve.
Yeah. Be well.
Thank you very much.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.